The most distinguishing characteristic of Roman art, especially in their figural sculptures, would be realism. Portrait sculptors of the Republican period created lifelike images seemingly based on the careful observation of their subjects. The strong emphasis on portraiture in Roman art may stem from the early practice of creating likeness of revered figures and distinguished ancestors for display on public occasions, most notably funerals. Growing out of this heritage, Roman Republican portraiture is frequently associated with the notion of verism, an interest in the faithful reproduction of the immediate visual and tactile appearance of subjects. From this emphasis on verism in Republican period develops a new Roman artistic ideal in human representation, an ideal quite different from the one we saw in Greek classicism. Instead of generalizing a human face, smooth it of its imperfection and caught in a moment of detached abstraction, this new Roman idealization emphasized the hallmarks of advanced age and the distinguishing aspects of individual likenesses. This mood prominently appears in portraits of Roman patricians, whose time-worn faces embody the wisdom and experience that come with old age. Frequently, we take these portraits of wrinkled elders at face value, as highly realistic and faithful descriptions of actual human beings. But there is a good reason to think that these portraits actually conform to a particularly Roman type of idealization that underscores the effects of aging on the human face. Portraiture was one way that the patrician class celebrated its elevated position in society. This life-size marble statue of Roman patrician reflects the importance that patricians placed on their genealogy. In Republican Rome, ancestor portraits separated the old patrician family not only from the middle and lower classes of working citizens and former slaves, but also from the newly wealthy and powerful of more modest origins. Patrician pride in genealogy was unquestionably the motivation for this portrait statue. This man is wearing a toga, the badge of Roman citizenship, and proudly holding the portrait busts of his father and grandfather. These faces share a striking family resemblance. The busts of ancestors that he holds in his hands document his distinguished lineage in the privileged upper class, and the statue as a whole proclaims his adherence to the family tradition by having his own portrait created. Historians mark the passage from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire in 27 BCE, when the Senate conferred the title of Augustus on Octavian. The empire was ostensibly a continuation of the Republic, with the same constitutional offices. But, in fact, Augustus occupied all the key positions. He controlled all aspects of Roman public life. Every town throughout the vast Roman Empire, portraits of the emperors were on display anywhere a statue could be placed in. All were replicas of official images, either imported or copied by local artists. But the imperial sculptors combined portrait heads with many different statuary types. This portrait of Augustus shows him as an armed general. Roman artists of the Augustan age created a new style, a new Roman form of idealism that revived Greek classical ideals, while still grounded in the appearance of the everyday world. They enriched the art of portraiture in both official images and representations of private individuals, and also they contributed to Roman Imperial Propaganda. The models for many of Augustus' portraits or classical Greek statue to present himself as the ruler who would place Rome on a par with or as greater than Athens in the era of a golden age. This statue of the emperor portrays Augustus as a commander-in-chief, standing like Polycletus's spear-bearer, but with his right arm raised to address his troops in the manner of the orator Alemetele. Although Augustus's head was depicted as the recognizable individual, it emulates the idealized heroic Greek youth. However, Augustus is not nude, and the details of the statue carry political messages. The gesture of the orator, the military uniform, and the toga indicate his authority. Also, the Cupid at his feet proclaims his divine descent. His family traced their ancestry back to Venus. Cupid was the goddess's son. Imperial portraits were objects of propaganda, proclaiming the accomplishments and pretensions of emperors. Marcus Aurelius was a successful military commander who was equally proud of his intellectual attainments. His head, with its thick, curly hair and full beard, resembles traditional philosopher portraits from the Greek world. The emperor wears no armor and carries no weapons. Like Egyptian kings, he conquers effortlessly by divine will. And like his predecessor Augustus, he reaches out to those around him in a rhetorical gesture of address. It is difficult to create an equestrian portrait in which the rider stands out as the dominant figure without making the horse look too small. The sculptor of this statue found a balance acceptable to viewers of the time, and in doing so, created a model for later artists. Perhaps more than any other statuary type, the equestrian portrait expresses the Roman emperor's majesty and authority. However, the message of supreme confidence is not conveyed by the portrait head of Marcus's equestrian statue or any of other portraits of the emperors in the years just before his death. Portraits of aged emperor were not new at the time, but Marcus's were the first in which a Roman emperor appeared weary, saddened, and even worried. For the first time, the strain of constant warfare on the frontiers and the burden of ruling a worldwide empire show in the emperor's face. The sculptor ventured beyond Republican verism, exposing the ruler's character, his thoughts, and his soul for all to see. This was a major turning point in the history of ancient art, and it marked the beginning of the end of classical art's domination in the Greco-Roman world.